So I think it's pretty clear that this latest crisis, this latest sickness has essentially changed our way of life and may change it permanently. But that's why in this video specifically, I don't want to talk about the sickness, but I want to talk about the effects of the sickness. Specifically, I want to discuss what is essentially the end of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. Tim Picciott will, of course, be joining us and talking about how this is essentially also the end of capitalism. Now, of course, those are very big implications that we're talking about here, but the effects are also severe of everything that's happening right now. And I think it's important right now to look at government in a very critical way, since many times, historically speaking, government solutions to problems are usually sometimes worse than the problem. So I think it's more important than ever to be extra vigilant right now. And when you look at specifically the United States' response to this sickness, it's not the best, especially when you compare it to other countries like India, South Korea, Singapore, and territories like Hong Kong that have been having more of a grip on this. When you look at the ventilator companies that had to go public, saying no one's called them, we're not ramping up production, we can, but we're not. When you look at mask factories saying there's FDA regulations stopping us 3 months from working on this. When you look at the tracing, the tracking, let's be honest here, the government has been given an absolute F on their handling of all of this. And I do believe we need to be critical of them, because if you look at previous big, large government endeavors, like let's say the Iraq War, that costed $2.4 trillion, almost $820 million a day for a very long time. We're looking at the amount of money, that amount of resources we spent on that pointless conflict based on wars, based on the media lying to us about it. And you're telling me we don't have enough money and resources to fight this contagion? I mean, seriously, there should be a lot of criticism. And when we see the government's response to this, it is not a response of dealing with this situation properly, but it's a response of government doing what they usually do, and that's taking away people's liberties and rights. That's something that the government is very effective in, as of course many states, many local jurisdictions are implementing laws that are essentially eviscerating any essential rights you have. Now, I'm not going to discuss whether they're right or wrong, but I think it's important to document them as they're happening. Specifically also the case of a Virginia governor that now is making the attendance of church a criminal offense. In other countries like Spain and other local jurisdictions, even here, we are seeing government enforcing complete, total lockdowns, even with police officers issuing very heavy penalties and fines for simply being outside or even being in your car. Yes, being in your car, which again, it prevents the spread of this, just helps people get out there, is also a criminal offense in some jurisdictions. In Spain, those laws are enforced very heavily. The driving laws, they're a little bit perplexing. And of course, we have to understand this is what is the MO of government. Government is perfect at not addressing the situation, but of course, taking your rights during a crisis where, of course, people are panicking and won't be questioning those large invasive measures made by local governments, police officers. Again, on a federal level, it's not as detrimental, but on a local level, we're seeing a lot of very aggressive actions that really should be understood by a lot of people. And of course, as all of this happening, people are told to trust the Pharma-Industrial Complex, which again has to be pointed out here. And I'm not trying to debate what is happening is right and wrong, but people should understand some of the basic facts, some of the precursors here. When you look at the Pharma-Industrial Complex and the medical industrial complex, they usually don't have the best record, to say the least. And these are the institutions that we're told to trust the most now, that they're going to come and save us. Institutions and multinational corporate interests like Bayer, that again, knowingly also sold HIV-infected proteins in order to make a profit through their previous dealings. They also tell us to trust mega institutions like Baxter, that also sent bird flu virus to European labs by error and almost created their own pandemic. And of course, also other institutions within the U.S. government have to be criticized as well, especially after incidents like the anthrax attack investigations that were officially closed after, again, mysterious suicides, which all the evidence suggests that the anthrax attacks, biological, chemical weapons that were sent all throughout the United States, originated in a U.S. military lab facility, specifically the Fort Detrick's lab facility that could have manufactured it and produced it. And other states are suspending rule of laws and releasing a large number of criminals from jails, since, of course, the situation in jails is also becoming an extremely bad situation where prison officials like the ones in New York are told not to wear masks. They spread the virus, and devastation is ensued in the prisons, causing many prisoners to be on the streets as some jurisdictions disarm you, as rule of laws are not being followed. And how can they, with people, of course, becoming sick and being afraid of becoming sick as well? This is, of course, a recipe of disaster, along with the government failing with the basic pandemic protocols, failing to appropriately address what's happening right now. We are sure in for a lot of more pain, a lot of more of a crisis to ensue, which, again, the government will use to its benefit and gain more power over you because of it. And this is, in a way, what we've seen is just the essential loss of our liberty in regard to this pandemic that, again, wouldn't be as bad if it wasn't for the proper procedures that were followed, but they were not. So that's my take on just how we are essentially seeing the end of the Constitution, which I think is very important to report on, without, of course, the larger context of what's happening with this larger sickness. That's my take on it. Tim, your turn, and tell us how capitalism is doing.
Yeah, well, thanks, Luke. Well, one of the things, you're on a roll there, so I didn't want to interrupt you, but, you're talking about Bayer. I mean, Bayer, they would never do anything wrong. I mean, they're only the company that was their predecessor company is IG Farben, they're the ones who made the gas that killed the Jews. And then when after the war, they ended up breaking up the company, I believe, into like 6 different companies. I think one of them was BASF. One of them was Bayer. And now Bayer has actually, and so when they did that, they didn't have any liability for what happened during World War II. And then but now I'm sure now that they've merged with Monsanto, that I'm sure that everything is all good over at Bayer. So it's like you take all these evil companies, merge them together, and now I'm sure if Satan had a company, that would probably be pretty high up on the list. But I think one of the important things, really the only article I want to share here, is taking a look at the planks of the Communist Manifesto, because we want to talk about the end of capitalism. We want to talk about the end of the Constitution. Well, what is the antithesis of both of that? That would have to be Karl Marx and the Communist Manifesto. So if you go down and take a look at these 10 planks, abolition of private property and land and application of all rents and land for public purpose. Check, pretty much on the way for that one. A heavy progressive or graduated income tax. Check. Abolition of all rights of inheritance. Well, we don't completely have that, but there are things like the Secure Act that was just passed actually in December, where any IRAs or 401ks, you have 10 years to take all of your money out, so that way the government can get all of their hands on all of your tax. And then you got the estate tax that's right around 50%, but those numbers are pretty high right now. However, we're moving in that direction. Confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. The government can pretty much seize through civil asset forfeiture or eminent domain anything they want. They can say, hey, you've got 40 masks that you had commandeered or you had bought in advance. We're the government. We need to take those. But here's the biggie for what I talk about: centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. Sort of sounds like me to that they're talking about the Federal Reserve over there. We've got the centralization of means of communication and transportation in the hands of the state. I mean, Luke was reporting just the other day about how, through Facebook Messenger apps and through all these, big tech companies that they want to give up, that the government wants your data so that way they can geolocate you. I mean, over in China, they're, making people have different apps. And so that way they know if they're doing, proper social distancing. extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, the bringing into cultivation of wastelands and the improvement of soil, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, I mean, the government is going ahead and saying things like, hey, we should take your company and we think that it would be better for them to make X, Y, Z. And then, oh, by the way, the Federal Reserve is coming and buying the corporate bonds, which at that point is the state-owned corporations.
And the FBI is warning against supposed hoarders. So if you're hoarding any kind of medical facility, I don't know what the broad definitions are. Again, you don't want anything in general. You don't want anything broad given to the federal authorities because they will definitely use it to the full extent. Now, obviously, if people are doing something illegal or something wrong, yes. But a lot of times we see the laws implemented in many bastardized ways as well. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, I know. And you obviously know that not all of the doing something wrong and doing something illegal isn't this. I mean, at one point it was illegal to, help, free slaves or help. I mean, there's all sorts of things that used to be illegal at one point. Now, number 8 here, equal obligation of all to work. And so we've got, just look at all the social justice warrior stuff coming out of, Right for 15, and we'll get into that in a little bit. 9, a combination of agriculture and manufacturing industries, gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country, a more equitable distribution of the population over the country. I mean, we see that how they're trying to get rid of, they want the federal government to be in control of everything. And so, I mean, technically the sheriff, the local sheriff is, and how common law was written was supposed to be the most powerful person in the county, but we're seeing the federal government trying to usurp that as well. And then 10, free education for all children in government schools, abolition of children's factory labor in present form, combination of education with industrial production. And so, I mean, right there, basically, you could argue in some form or another, we have all 10 of those already going on right now. So you got to ask yourself, how free of a country we really are. And for me, it wasn't Trump's slogan of "Make America Great Again." I had a hat that said "Make America Free Again." So for me, America is about freedom. It's not about making it great. It depends what your definition of great is. Is great only the stock market? Because if so, I guess he was having a pretty good run there for a while. But just take a look at all the things that go on. So in capitalism, a lot of people don't know that there was a panic of 1907. During the panic of 1907, you had the stock market rapidly decline. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it was down like 70, 80% in the course of very, very short amount of time, and then immediately ramped right back up. Now, the reason you don't hear about that in the government schools is because they let all the industry crash, and then the free market took over, and then things eventually bounced back up. And you had people like J.P. Morgan at the time, the actual J.P. Morgan, not the company, who he had to then personally backstop the system. He said, hey, this sort of sucks that I've got to, put my own capital at risk. Wouldn't it be better if there was something called the Federal Reserve? And so then, they snuck in, originally it's called the Aldrich Plan. Aldrich was the senator from, I believe he was tied into, I think he was Rockefeller's father-in-law, but everybody knew that. So then they repackaged it as the Federal Reserve Act in 1911. It eventually passed December 23rd, 1913. And you take a look at what happened in 2008, and it was sort of, basically the replay of the panic of 1907. However, J.P. Morgan didn't have to personally backstop it. So it's capitalism on the way up. It's crony, basically this corporate welfare socialism for the banks on the way down. We get in trouble, and you and I have got to pay 25% interest rates. And missed a payment. Oh, boom, there's a late fee. And then we're stacking on top of this. And then we're going to go take your, $50,000 of credit you have with us. We're going to cut it down to $20,000 of credit, which is, what your bill is. And then there's a cascading effect of all your other credit cards and all get cut, which then further screws your credit rating. And the average person, and there's probably people out there who know exactly what I'm talking about, except if you're a banker, because if you get in a little bit of trouble, you get to use all our money, leverage it up. You don't even have to have any of it in reserve. And then, the people get absolutely screwed time and time again. And so, but unfortunately, everybody wants to, let's go give the government more laws and more regulations. Well, who's the one in charge of all the laws and regulations? It's always the fox guarding the hen house. So you've got a bunch of Goldman Sachs guys, a bunch of Treasury guys, they, them, those bankers who are then in control of what the bankers do.
Yeah, there's a fine balance here because there are some idiots making the situation worse, especially the sickness that are making it worse. But I think a lot of the idiocy is also spurred on by this belief that the government is there. The government is going to protect you. This kind of falsehood that, yeah, they're in charge. They got everything. Everything's going to be cool. Everything's going to be fine. And I think if we got rid of that falsehood, a lot of people would be more responsible for themselves. And I think this is why we would be taking this situation more seriously, because some people are not. I'm still taking this situation seriously. It's a fine balance. And again, to me, public outreach, informing people about how to stay clean, how to sanitize themselves, how to make a face mask, how to wear a face mask would essentially, slow down that huge curve, essentially slow down a lot of the larger infections, and essentially also make a lot of more people responsible for themselves. This is what we're calling for. This is, I think, the most effective thing to combat all of this, is to be truly responsible for yourself, your family, your community, and to spread out the important information that needs to be out there. The government's not taking it seriously, but we still should. Now the government is taking more aggressive measures, and they're stepping in. And of course, with their stepping in, there's going to be, of course, a lot of overstepping as well, which we have to look out for and call for. There's extreme situations happening right now. There's a lot of extreme measures. We should keep our eyes and ears open to all of them. Thanks, Tim. Thank you so much for joining me. We're going to be talking about the unemployment numbers. We're going to be talking about the Federal Reserve and so much more in other videos. So, of course, stay tuned for more here on, We Are Change or Change the News. Still haven't decided. We have 2 channels. Make sure you check them out, both. Thank you again so much for watching. Stay tuned for more.